Welcome to the second belly dance video sponsored by Medans, the Middle Eastern Dance Association of New Zealand. This time we're going to be looking at basic belly dance posture. Hi, I'm Kashmir, and are you standing up straight? Is that actually what posture's about? Is it standing up straight? Well, posture, we talk about posture because it actually it is a looking thing, there is aesthetics involved, but more to the point, it actually makes your movements easier and safer. So what do I mean by basic posture? Let's have a look at what I say to my beginner students. Quite simple really, we start at the bottom. Your feet should be facing forward, that's not turned out, about hip width apart. Your knees are soft, slightly bent, definitely not locked. Your pelvis is in neutral. Your rib cage is lifted out of your belly. Your shoulders are down. Your neck is nice and long, and your head is facing forward. You're actually balanced one on top of the other, so you're not leaning forward or back, or side to side. It's really quite simple. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. One of the reasons why we have our feet facing forward is because that gives you the most flexibility in your hips. As you turn out, you'll tend to engage your glutes, and that will tighten up the hip area a little bit. So we keep them facing forward, that makes it nice and simple. Now some dancers prefer a much closer stance, and some dancers, if you're doing say folkloric, will prefer a slightly wider stance. There is a certain amount of flexibility in this, but for beginners I say keep them about hip width apart. Now the knees are very important, especially if you've got older students in your class, or if you are an older student. You want to keep them nicely over your feet and just very slightly bent. When I started dancing, which was quite some time ago, the fashion was actually quite a deep bend. It made the hip work really, really easy, but with the tighter skirts that are used these days, it looks incredibly ugly. So the fashion now is for a slightly straighter leg, but it's still not locked. Even this misnamed straight-legged shimmy, you're not actually locking your knees. You're taking it from slightly bent to almost straight. Now if your knees do tend to squint in, especially when you're moving, you may need to work on your inner thighs and your glutes. So your inner thighs and glutes will actually pull those legs into place, and you'll need a mirror or possibly a video and just practice. So it's a case of actually looking, thinking, oh, what's happening with my knees? Okay, I need to pull out. Look at those inner thighs, pull them out so they actually line up over the feet. With some movements like figure eights, if you're using your legs to make the figure eight, not only will that make your horizontal figure eight quite bumpy, but it'll also squint your knees in while you're doing it. Doing it for 30 seconds is not a big deal, but if you're doing a lot of drilling, you really want to try and get rid of that squint. So you need to actually learn to do your figure eights with your abs. Now the pelvis. This is the hardest one. Among some people these days, there seems to be a fashion for a dropped pelvis. They seem to think it's really sexy. Well, actually, it is if you're going to be involved in mating, but we're dancing. Actually, when we did jazz, we actually did quite a bit of drop pelvis work, but it was used actually as an accent. It wasn't the standard posture. So we want to actually keep that pelvis at neutral. And when I'm saying pelvis in neutral, I'm not talking about lordosis, which is the curve in the lower back, or if you've got a big butt. What I'm talking about is actually where the bones in your hips are. And we can actually look at there's a bone at the front and the back, and I have actually done workshops where I've actually stripped people down and put little dots on it, and so you could actually see whether or not people's pelvises were dropped. You can't do that every day. It depends on the venue and it depends on the people. Another thing to think of is if you're wearing real knickers, not thongs, is the seam of your knickers running straight up and down. So you basically want that pelvis to be neutral, is what they call it, neutral. So if you're a person who drops the pelvis, you need to pick it up with your lower abs. Don't tuck with your glutes. That's why I try and not say tuck anymore, because people tuck, they think of their butt, they tighten it up, and there they are. They're tucked. Well, yes, but now try and move. So it's important to actually use those lower abs. The problem is if you normally stand with a drop pelvis, the thing you haven't got is strong lower abs, because they're always extended, and it's really hard to pick it up there. So it's quite a learning experience, and you probably need to do some separate strengthening exercises. The other thing that helps is to actually bend your knees a little bit. Now you're standing here, you've got your beautiful pelvis in a nice neutral position, and you're standing there and you look perfect. Okay, right. Now start drilling. Because although many people can actually stand with their posture in a good position, once they actually start moving their hips, all sorts of weird things happen. So you need to be able to drill with your neutral pelvis, if the movement allows you to do that, and obviously some movements won't, and then dance. And for this, you can't do it by yourself. You can do a certain amount with the mirror, but really, you're going to be turning sideways and looking at the mirror. It's quite hard. A video is useful, or a friend or a teacher who can correct you, because you don't want to drill the wrong position. So if you actually sit there and you drill for 30 minutes in the wrong position, one is actually, you might actually start to hurt it, your lower back might start to give you a few twinges, but more to the point, you're actually training your body to dance in the wrong position. I haven't said a lot about upper body, and it's partly because I do a lot of mostly Egyptian, which doesn't do a lot of upper body. But as a minimum, you need to be able to lift your rib cage out of your belly so you can do your isolations. So don't let yourself slump into it. And like I said, the shoulders should be nicely arranged. Arms is the other one. A number of people just let their arms hang. I mean, sometimes you've got a nice arm position, but if your arms are down, keep the tension in here. It's like you've got little helium balls, and just keeping a little bit of tension in here, and this will also keep your upper chest up. So some people actually talk about leading from here, and that's not a silly idea either. So that's the theory. There's a few places where it's going to break down, and the first is that you're going to have stylistic differences. Like I said earlier, you might want your feet further closer together or further apart. You may also, for example, be doing something like an early balladi or an old-fashioned gwazi, in which case you're going to have a lean back. So you've got to have take that into consideration. Next, bodies vary. If any one of you have actually seen my lower legs, you'll see that my bones don't line up nicely like they do in the diagrams, and that's just the way I'm born, or the way my legs later on developed as a small child. I can't do anything about that. The bones are set now. I'm an adult. And similarly with the shoulders, and I always tell my students, lift, squeeze, drop, and for most people that will put the shoulders into the right position. For me it doesn't, and again, that's bone. You can't change bone. But for many people, their problems with posture are due to inflexibility in the muscle or weakness, and in both cases you can do something about that. But you have to be targeting your problems. So you need to actually see a specialist for this, a sports physio, someone like that. And you need to do stretches which address your problems. There's no point in doing general stretches if you've actually got particular issues you need to address. So you need to address your problems, and you need to do the stretches correctly. Same with strengthening exercises. If you've got weak inner thighs, then you need to work on your weak inner thighs. Doing a whole body strengthening is great, but it's not working on the thing that you need to work on. And at the beginning it was a bit of a joke, stand up straight. That can be just as bad. You're not actually standing at attention, you're not actually rigid. This is your basic posture is something you keep going back to. You move in and out of it. You need to be able to come into it and then move out of it as is needed. And it's not just your dance class. Your posture is something that's with you all the time. It's how you walk, it's how you stand, it's how you sit at your desk, it's how you speak on the telephone. At least with cell phones these days, you don't have the the old telephones you used to put on your neck. It's even how you sleep. So when you're thinking about posture, you're thinking about 24/7. And like I said, keep standing up straight, because when you're leaning, you're having to use muscle to keep yourself in position. So the laziest thing to do is actually stand up straight and let the bones sit on each other. Well, I hope that was useful for you, and thank you very much to Medans for their sponsorship. If you're interested in sponsoring it, have a look down below, and I've got some information on my website. Thank you.